Well, thanks for coming, everybody. I hope that some of the students will join us, but I think we'll get going for respect to everybody's time. And yeah, you can condense down. It's beautiful to be back, and I promised myself if I ever came back here, I would dedicate whatever I did first and foremost to the professors who really helped shape who I became as an artist. Well, I'm really glad to see 3 of them here, but then also Gilda, of course, Nancy, Joe Bernard, Joe Wesner, Dennis Gelfi, Matt Holland. I didn't really realize until I was reflecting on this presentation quite how much history had passed and how much had happened in the last 20 years. So, of course, I'm Steve Brown, for anybody who hasn't met me before. What I want to do tonight is really present the 2 books that I published this year. They're books of poetry, and more than anything, give an experience of the work. So just recite and read the work and let you all go on a journey with the writing together, and intersperse an overall, I'd say, theme of artist survival. I won't go too deep into a background, but I went here in 1999 through 2003, and when I came here, I was extremely lucky to have gotten in. As a teenager, I spent most of that time, people probably don't really know this, but wasted on drugs and alcohol, to be quite frank, after trying to kind of recover from some childhood things. And when I got here, I couldn't believe it, and I poured my life into this school. And I was working full-time, commuting, and this experience here did save my life because I had no plan in life, and I really didn't have any values other than creativity. The one thing I could do was draw or tinker or make or write and noodle, and to find a place where I could have students who talked the same language and were all eager to learn meant everything to me. And I've carried that with me throughout my life, which has been spent in a tension between working for a salary or for jobs. The biography on the back of the books, I just had to go for it. So it lists, busboy, cook, roofer, construction worker, driver, grant writer, substitute teacher, you name it, in order to, for one, yes, put the proverbial bread on the table, but also, I think, to be quite honest, as a way of keeping fear at bay, the fear of committing myself fully to art, the fear of being financially needy, the fear of being just an artist, quote unquote. That was something which it took me many, many years to get over, and I wish I had known a lot sooner in life that it is okay, and we can chart these lives for ourselves. So I'm here, in a sense, in a birth, in a sense, of what I want the next kind of creative half of my life to look like. And the books that I have are Trample and Sew and News of Need, and these are poetry chapbooks. They're about 80 pages each. And I'm gonna recite and read from some of them. The Trample and Sew is first, probably best described as early writing, and in some sense it's a gift to myself that I had to just get it out and get it published. And then News of Need is much more recent. One thing I wanted to touch on here, so I wanted to do kind of a double act here, because I am, of course, at a university. So my themes are best described, I think. One of them is from Alan Watts, if anybody remembers him. He's having a second life at the moment, but one of his quotes is, "What is reality?" And then he says, "No one can say, because it's not made of words." And that's the challenge. It's also not made of dance. It's also not just made of painting. It's also not just made of stone carving. But we as artists have to face that difficulty and that compromise and find the part of life that we're able to give voice to through the chosen mediums that we have. And so the struggle in these poems is somewhat of that, to get as much as I can in them. The epigraph for this is from Raymond Carver, and he's somebody who had a huge impact on my life. When I found a book of his above a Goodwill in an old apartment in Ohio 20 years ago, I had no idea who he was or that he was one of the most significant short story writers in kind of American history. I found him as a poet, and one of the lines is, "Today, my heart, like the front door, stands open for the first time in months." And that's from a poem of his titled Bankruptcy. And I chose that because, one of the things he showed me was the poetry I'd grown up with that kept me at arm's length was not the poetry that I wanted to write, and it wasn't the poetry I had to write. It didn't have to be Gerard Manley Hopkins, it didn't have to be T.S. Eliot, it didn't have to be, you name it. It could be in very plain English from working class people and convey that. So one of the poems that I'll start with is called Laundry Night Coshocton, and it's from a time I spent in Appalachian, Ohio when I was down there doing an art project. Laundry Night Coshocton. Tough guy isn't slow to follow. He says, "Come here, ugly," because she deserves it. Thinks she deserves it because there are no other options. She thinks. I want to tender them. Ask her. Know why he grabs her by the jean pockets and snaps her in hip bones to hip bones. She leans back, open throat, saying, "No," saying something unclear to him, like, "Please, Jake." Yes, I get it. And all it takes is for her to say, "Stop looking at me," for pretty Jake to scatter my teeth to corners, like pissed off quarters. Tokens, maybe, unredeemed. Virile beauty remains the most compelling argument mankind has advanced. And I put that in the book beside a poem from much later titled Interlude Kalamazoo, which has a bridge of the laundromat theme. It seems to be a recurring part of my life. Interlude Kalamazoo. Under the old oaks next to the laundromat, a boy in red shirt and too short pants decapitates gone-to-seed dandelions with a fishing pole. He swings left and right, like a surf, wearied and fading into clouds of chaff. On the block behind him come men down off rented stoops, slow strolling in the heat of midday to the store. Green store, we call it, after its color, giving the small red figure a wide glance. One man leaning on a car roof to conduct window business pauses, points, and laughs at the boy, because we can all see. Now, he tells himself the story about who he, warrior, is, who he has vanquished with his sword and who is saved. Transfixed, the boy does not notice the smirking woman, his mother perhaps after her burdened gaze at him, sitting on the rotten pew that has been bolted down to the front brick of the laundromat since before God. She watches the child, admiring his redness, admiring, too, cold beers floating past in hot hands from Green Store. Then comes the interlude. Sun stops scything, stops saving. The men have vanished, and mother is asleep on her pew. It is a moment within this safety and calm that is not a second, minute, hour, or coordinate, yet we all know that it has arrived. We watch it. The seed tufts of the beheaded flowers drift and swirl, rising in rays of light between the old oaks. So at this time, I was really still focused on compressing as much as I could into as brief of a period, and I would work these poems again and again and again. A brief note on my process, because I still at heart am a sculptor. I still at heart am a drawer. My background here was in visual arts, and I just want to work the page. I want to excavate what's in there. I want to try new things, add new things. And so I write just on copy paper, and I'll work them that way in a pile. And when I'm done with a piece for the day, I'll just put it to the back of the pile. And whatever's there, I have to deal with. And that's a way of turning a corner at myself and seeing the painting, as it were, in the morning. What did I do yesterday? And I can come upon it like it's a stranger's work and see it in a fresh way that catches me off guard, that kind of short circuits my bullshit radar of, oh, I see what you were trying to do, but it didn't quite work. So what else can you do? And these are all things that I learned here. These are all things that had to be tutored in through repetition. As Hemingway said, you have to kill your babies, and that's exactly what it is I might have loved that stanza, but it's not working, and I can see it with fresh eyes. It has to go. These other pieces will be longer from the second book. But so, for example, this is titled Used Vehicle. Used vehicle. Went to look at a used vehicle. It was a van. It was a minivan. Clean and complete, but blown right the hell out. Man made a level offer. Ma stood by smoking on the used lot, and had you not called to say, yes, come to New York, I would have forever stayed loaded in Detroit with what ifs. The echo of, I don't know, your father knows this stuff, ringing in my ears, even if the van ran until rapture. If your mother raised you, and there's a damn good chance she did, never have her there these days, because childhood slept in minivans. If only you could call your father, she'll say, smoking on the used lot, and not for the last time. So it was at this time, we'll go on a little journey through my life. After I graduated from CCS, I did work here locally, but then I was accepted into a fellowship program out of Ann Arbor called Art Train USA, and that was actually forwarded to me by Maria Pranito of the Fine Arts Department. And that was an exhibition in 4 historic Bud train cars that toured the country to areas that didn't have access to sort of traditional institutional art facilities. So I was living in motels and kind of flop houses for a year, setting this museum up in different railroad towns all throughout the eastern half of the US. It was a formative experience. It's where I met a tremendous number of people that I'm still in touch with today, actually. And one of the people was a woman with whom I collaborated for a number of years on a public project in Coshocton, Ohio, which still continues to this day. It was a public lot where we activated it to be a community space and a space for local programming, which when I drive through Detroit now, it's very familiar, this approach to public work. But she was married, and I was young, and we had an interesting relationship, and we're still good friends. But there's a few pieces that I just wanted to share from that time, again, about the compression of the writing. This is titled, You Left Your Oven Burning. You left your oven burning with the door wide open. I awoke alone to this sight, minus a man on his knees, my head in your oven, right? You say you know exactly when I fell in love with you? No, you don't know. It was the first time I know I saw humility in the kitchen. Turns out your husband hadn't chopped enough wood for 2 people plus some guy he doesn't know from Adam, and you're not supposed to ask drifters to feed your wood stove. And there's about 4 or 5 poems that form a cycle in here. The second to last one is called With Tenderest Consideration. Never felt so naked as when I stood in your bathroom with no curtains, no one around, not for miles and miles, except your husband, who loitered in the dark side yard, lingering, locking up the barn, making the noises men make, like chains dragging over old beams, while I was there, from the knees up, knowing he never got a son, standing in the mothed light long after the bath water had warmed above body temperature. Strange, then. He's the one I finally gave myself to, and with tenderest consideration. The way that I put these books together was ultimately thematic. It's almost pat to say that the next ones will be garden and nature, and then love and relationships and marriage. But at the end of the day, I have to make a decision about what goes where and how to organize it. And it can be chronological, it can be the style of the poem, but I think it's better that when people enter into a space of a book, that's certainly what I enjoy, that I can develop again, it's like an exhibition. I see it, where's the variation in the theme? Where's the unity and the variety? I don't see it as a literary exercise. I see it as a kind of a dreamscape, kind of a dreaming. And so this book develops in an interesting way. I'll jump around here time-wise. I lived in England for a year where my husband moved for work. I had gone to Germany for grad school and lived there for 2 years, couldn't afford a plane ticket home, lucked into a job at a private library, worked there for 2 years, living in an apartment that cost $180 a month. I had a coal oven. I had to buy bricks of coal in the fall and feed the oven. It was terribly romantic, nothing like it. Walking everywhere, smoky air, former East Germany. And that's where I met the man to be my husband. He was married at the time. This is a theme, I know. We've now been together for 15 years, married for 10. And after that period, we kept trying to do the green card thing. It didn't really work out. I was back here for 3 years working at the Art Center up north, the Oliver Art Center. I was executive director there, making $27,000 a year with no benefits to work 80 hours a week and put on 110 classes a year and 16 exhibitions. But it was, in a sense, a second master's degree. It was a baptism by proverbial fire professionally, and I wouldn't change it for the world. Again, there's a theme, is people there who are irreplaceable to me, and I'll have as friends for the rest of my life, creatively and personally. But so the year in England was an interesting time to write and to drill back into what I was trying to accomplish. And this is from where we were, Salisbury, which is on the south coast. This is titled Salisbury Chantry, and a chantry is one of the parts of a Catholic cathedral where you could pay priests in olden days to go and try to extend your time in heaven without going into purgatory. If I have that correct, I apologize if I don't. Salisbury Cathedral, Salisbury Chantry. The others have swords or blades of praying hands fixed upright on their shielded breasts. Bishop Wanfleet, Bishop Eddington. But this man, this gardener, he lies naked, save a loincloth, gaping skyward, eyes and mouth empty, spine visibly contoured through the sunken flesh of his gut. The other's clean marble has been sought out by the dusty shafts of light for 500 years, but this man, this gardener, is stained brown and burnished from fingers reaching in, slipping through the stone tracery, even whole hands, arms of children up to the shoulder, straining to touch sinew, just once. The mean curve of toenail, the shadow of nipple on rib, the tattered rag covering his pit of withered genitalia. Seems appropriate since you have a stone carving program here. So I'd like to jump to News of Need. And these are poems that, for the most part, they're written and finished within the last 5 years, with exceptions. But one of the parts that's important to know here is that I've gotten to know a lot of people through recovery from alcohol and drug use, and people who I knew through that echoed people I had known my whole life in working jobs, kitchens, roofing, construction, you name it. And so, respectfully, all the stories in here are either anonymized or they're sort of compressed of impressions of people. There's the concept from the director Werner Herzog, which is ecstatic truth. And so, again, we get back to that quote I started with, which is, what is reality? Nobody can say because it's not made of words. Okay, how does the writing arrive in you with words, and in this case, a performance is the medium, in a way that's sort of true to the vision. I'm only responsible for what I write. I can't say how you receive it or you receive it. It's not my business, really. Your interpretation is is the beauty of how it's going to land. So with that, I do have to think about, I'm not writing a poem so much as I'm writing a reader, or I'm writing a listener. And so when I'm inside of a poem and I'm thinking about words on a page, it's not words on a page. It's whatever happens in your mind when you see that word manifolding through all of your experience and all of your fears and all of your dreams and all of your hopes and every book you've ever read and every movie you've ever seen. And if you're hungry, if you just got laid, all these things come together to that moment of wow or meh. And so I have to keep that in mind as a writer, that I'm not going to waste your time. I'm not going to bullshit you. Because also, first and foremost, this is I use a bunch of loaded words here, but I will preface them by saying that I mean this clumsily and ignorantly. This is a truth-seeking exercise. I don't know really what that word means, lowercase t, truth, but it's looking for something that in philosophy they call a brick wall problem. You can say it's just molecules, you can say it's only so high, you can say it's just brick, but you run at that wall and you tell me how unreal that wall is. You're gonna smash face first. There's a thing that can happen in art which we know it when we see it. It's why music can change our lives, it's why books can haunt us, it's why we drop everything to tell somebody about a movie or drag them to an exhibition. And to go back to that original theme of CCS really saving and giving me and helping to shape my life, art continues to do that today. There were a lot of years where, when I was in Germany, I showed drawings in Japan, or I could talk about doing a performance in Hollywood at a Frank Lloyd Wright theater, or I could say we had a small short film that was screened in Sweden. Who cares? That's not a life. That's not a creative life, right? There's a quote from Sherwood Anderson: "The object of art is not to make saleable pictures, it is to save yourself." And I probably would have scoffed at that as a young student. Maybe not. But now I think it's the bedrock truth, is it's about a daily practice. I get up in the morning, I write. I have the good fortune with the career I have now to have a tremendous amount of flexibility. But I write whenever I can, and I write however I can. I take notes on my phone. I'm promiscuous. Just get the idea down. That's my only job. My job isn't to criticize the idea at first. It's not to edit. It's not to say, well, but. It's to get it down. That's what the universe demands of me. That's what I've committed to. And if I do that, if I make that little sacrifice, in some sense, I'm redeemed through it, is how I've come to see it. And that is a responsibility, but it's also a tremendous freedom, because it takes me into places creatively that are surprising, unexpected, strange, enjoyable. I do really believe it, inspiration's 1%, hard work is 99%, but that's also a false dichotomy. I mean, hard work is still inspiration, right? 1% isn't that small. You put a pinch of salt in the recipe and it makes the recipe, so can't knock that 1% of inspiration. But, so I'd like to read some and perform some out of here, and these are shifting in time and experience into, I think the title really says it. It's from one of the poems, News of Need. So this is titled, Who Shouldn't Be Scared? Who shouldn't be scared that he was smarter as a boy, at least smart enough to fear his own shadow sometimes, floating a shattered parking lot, his collar already sweat-ruined, meeting some man with powers over the possibilities in his home, For example, supper, even the home itself, what winter coats he and his kids get, what lines they may join, where Methodist ladies smile, old dentures and eye contact, homemaking chili with crackers, selling cookies next to coffee, nothing more than $1, and a view from the Wainscott Rectory of seagulls fighting over French fries, but very far from any shore. This is titled Safety. I wrote this, I think, to the patron saint of office workers, which helps protect me and a couple 100 million other people right now. Safety. No one I know knows what to do. Maybe few people ever have known day to day. Office work destroys memory. Paychecks create a desperate gratitude. Now we fall off into troughs of indecision, conveyed on black belts toward checkout. Goodie baskets will be offered thanklessly as thanks in fluorescent rooms partitioned for everyone's safety. The anger inside these rooms is laughing. The nylon hydrangeas are crumbling. Naturally, machine snacks do not reflect Earth's seasons. Nothing adheres to walls of small talk, muscle, laughter, love, time is up. Meanwhile, the world is shaped by cataclysms of nature and humans with plain intentions. Every day that the choice is made to sell off what little of life is lived, the heart grows sorer, grinding soul underneath. The idea of desperate gratitude in there, there's like a fulcrum, the thing that a seesaw, but metaphorically, visually, the fulcrum of a painting or a sculpture or an installation or a whole exhibition or a movie or a performance, something in time. I'm always looking for those opportunities. Again, I don't think any of these words are fancy. I try to use $1 words. I would be embarrassed if I couldn't connect with myself or have a chance to connect with myself 15 years ago, getting out of a kitchen at 2 a.m. or anybody I worked roofing. Poetry isn't for everybody, but where's that chance? Am I being generous? Am I forcing you out? Am I pulling you in? Where's the invitation? And one of those is with word choice. And they're simple. When you open the book, it doesn't look like you have to do more work. And so that fulcrum of desperate gratitude, for me, that's the thing that excites me and pulls me back each time. And I think if I have that excitement, you can find it too. There's poems that I've published in journals and magazines where I don't even necessarily like the work, but I know that it's good, and it's not my job to like it. It's my job to make it as good as it can and to free it out for somebody else. So, but damn, does it feel good when I can have a moment of surprise and enjoyment in the work. I'll read this one titled Cam. Imagine Cam restored to himself. As a young man of 15, prior to falling in love for the first time with drinking, before football games and learning to freebase cocaine from his coach. Imagine a man with teeth instead of sunken cheeks, with crisp words, not words slurred by loose flesh or drink, his body no longer standing in its own way. It can be moving to help him stand. A man who once towered 6'5" and positioned Buick transmissions by hand with pockets full of green cash, blonde numbers, and red pills. We only share Flint and alcoholism. Maybe, he says, He saw my parents driving me home from Hurley Hospital one December evening in 1980, me wrapped in a blanket, looking up for the first time into my mother's eyes against the wildness of night. Him wrapped in a blanket, looking up from the floor of an unheated flophouse across the street from Hurley, alone in a room so full of people the door wouldn't open. Now his bony hands of caved flesh are useless, even to stand himself up for his favorite, the Lord's Prayer. These hands rest quietly on the edge of the worn wood meeting table, a vein as plump and purple as a nightcrawler, pulsing over the cable-taut tendon of his thumb. We share this moment, too, pulsing, purple, pulsing. My unaccountable being here, he calls it. Our stars have aligned. His puffing breath presses over his slack-cracked lips. His long stubble is like an animal suit around the being of his shock blue eyes, which cry out from within, his ruined words, his ruined kidneys. His life and name are ruined, except among men who know him only as willing, helpful, needing help, and waiting to see if his death is rescued in perfect some night, and if he is restored to himself after all. This comment there's a first person in here. There's a my, there's a me and I. And I've made a very conscious decision. I don't know if I could put it down on a date, but to remove myself from the poems as much as possible. I even went so far as at one point I went back to things, and there's this whole series of writing that I couldn't get away from, but I would not accept that it was as good as it can be. And then I got rid of myself. And it was a revelation. And when I open poetry magazines now, I mean, I'm given to exaggeration, but this is true. Every single poem starts with I. And then you look through stories. I had a professor named Cheeto who actually, my senior thesis went through one time, and he said, every one of these paragraphs in your thesis begins with I. And it was true. It was embarrassing. And it was not good enough. I had to do better. Because I had to question, why is that? And so in the writing I realized, me as the spectator, me as the person, me as a character is lazy most of the time. Why am I in there? What am I doing? Who needs this I? It's also, I is the most prolific author in history. Who is this I, right? I put I in there and it's just this thing. Nobody knows me. It's not me. It's not Steve Brown. Who is Steve Brown? What part of me is the I? When I pull those out, I can have a story which just is able to then honor the ideas and the people in it and the narrative. And that to me was an absolute revelation. So when I use first person, I have to mean it for either a reason internal to the poem or one thing I learned in improv was, there's the thing of do one selfish and one selfless thing in every performance. So sometimes it's just the selfish thing. I just give it to myself, but I try not to. This is titled Halfway. He has 2 new hollows in his cheeks and smells of fried onions and hasn't had a drink in several days. If he could return to the love of having his wind knocked out for the very first time, there might be more to lose. For once, he might make plans based on who he is and was, and not on who he wishes he always had been. In his one small room with bed, table, lamp, and window, his breath is heavy, deep, echoless. His first paycheck is still 2 weeks away. But it is possible to nourish beasts without food, said some priest when he was groin high to men, still assuming all things worked out. Now he prefers Save-A-Lot because he can take those dumpstered loaves straight to the bank. For fun, he stashes dope and daydreams inside mattress frames, wedged in ducts, sunk deep in clean, soft, pale carpet next to some abandoned boy's bed. What I think happens, he says, is that one day they call you and they say you're not allowed to live anymore. And buddy, do you mind? I'll make a comment here. We're going on an arc, which doesn't all go through heavy poems. So I promised you, there'll be a small light at the end of the tunnel. I'll talk about birds and bees and flowers and trees, and I'll rhyme stuff. But I love this book and I love the people in it, and I want to share it. Every time I think I'm tired, I'm going to do a reading tonight, or what am I going to say? I just realize, even if I just stood up here and read poems until people left, I'd be happy, and I hope you would be happy too, because it's inside the stories and the dream spaces of these poems that the art happens. Midnight meeting. He must have been a handsome man. He must have turned heads, fit and striding into the bars that ruined him, then homes he ruined, without ever furnishing with reasons for his coming and going, beyond a used mattress on the floor and boxes of Spartan cornflakes on the counter. He remains remembered by some women as a man who brought Christmas gifts to kids who weren't his. Now his skin is putty gray and his eyes are black, hiding at midnight in the deep shadow of his ball cap. He has been awake for many days and many nights that seem like months and years, and wants to be put to bed, put down, held down by a single breast larger than any woman he has known. His hands have not stopped shaking since yesterday. His hands have not been clean since childhood, when he was shown how to repair tractors where they died in muddy fields and trucks left standing in yards the previous autumn. He must have been a beautiful boy, lanky and slinking around barns and tool cribs, shadowed by men who wanted to be more than his boss, whom he served but who never served him beyond pay, or a weekend bender in town keeping up with the guys who had been laid by a woman and knew sweet pain, not just pain. It is up to a point easiest to say, fuck it. Reasons, beautiful, seductive reasons, fall in the mind like black walnuts on a truck's roof. Being here at midnight is not easy just because it is necessary to not end up in jail or dead. Someone says he is glad everyone could make it tonight. It is a miracle to be here with just quiet and coffee and the heat going. We do not give thanks enough for quiet and coffee and heat. The gray man sucks his remaining teeth, hidden smilelessly in a closed mouth, and tips back his chair and his head to see under his ball cap who among us was crazy enough to talk about gratitude. His eyes flickering, man to man, in search of some sense, before settling his chair and head back into shadow, and a silence that has solved everything for him that blackouts and fighting could not. The haunting of work. Cleaning the job site at the end of the day, he paused to take in the newly laid roof while the work was still fresh in his blood. How straight all the courses of shingles were, how neatly the edges had been trimmed. The 40 hours of work each man put in, alone, within the forgetting of his own passing. The sound of them with their tools progressing, and the taste of cold water and sandwiches. And the way competence seems to maraud, like youth searching for any anvil, and how haunted the side yard seemed when the job was done and they drove away by the humble pride of strong workers, and how they smirked almost bashfully to demur when the homeowner said how thankful she was, thinking that nothing special had occurred except they had pulled off the old trick again of turning hard work into money, overwhelming the present with past training and bleeding and error and bone learning of the men with their tools and the years left in both that, yes, were limited and beautiful because of it, like a distracting song sung in the drenched heat of a back-breaking week. Because for the love of God, work like this cannot go on forever. So we can go on a little bit of a road trip into landscape now. This book, I think, in a word, is people and places that are left out, pushed out, left behind, used up. I know that they have a view that was shaped by me as a Metro Detroit kid. There's a unity of people and landscape that is maybe unique to where this city and this metro region and the state was in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And the way that place had such an enormous quality of character that we all felt it as a kind of a being in people's paintings, in their sculpture, in their writing. And so I consider myself part of that tradition and that mode of seeing, which I guess I meant to start with this as well, is ultimately that's what we do, is experience and sense and see and smell and touch and taste as artists. Point A, this is about Kalamazoo, which was a famous paper town. Point A, what if every single thing has a soul? Durable and stubborn so that the earth chokes with dead oaks and elephants, homes and documents, televisions and books, promises and lies and loves, even people we have discarded or have discarded us, making road building impossible, or simply walking from point A to point B across a once open meadow. Souls cannot be allowed to retard progress any more than the past can be allowed to prevent the future for those who cannot afford the homes and yachts and airships needed to survive the future. Stilted shacks where forefathers were born and died are foreclosed upon, relocated, and burned down. There, in the ashes, where the righteous live, one encounters breathing hulks, men denied schooling for burden, denied peace for war, anchored by ill hearts, murdered by toil for others. The spirit of history's warm, heaving flank rewards the wonder sleeping in any hand that dares touch her. The purpose of this place clears by torchlight the choked tunnel of flickering shadows on stone. Living stone appears to beat, slick wet, bacteria red. Offered this ritual, how would we cower, taking a living body into ourselves, giving our living body into another, washing in blood and calling ourselves cleansed? For today, no one is asking. Today, no one is telling. The trains still cross town, shadowed in stowaways. The creek still floods every spring. The poorest neighborhoods are still cut off from the hospital. A man gathers up cardboard begging signs left by others. He will burn them to start a heat fire along the riverbank, where mills once stood and poisoned the men, and poisoned the women, and the water and the air, but filled young bellies, and made the finest parchment paper, on which no man ever dreamed of writing, "Homeless, please help." For 7 years, I commuted 13 hours from Kalamazoo to Little Rock, where my husband lived. It was the only place he could work, and at that time, it was really the only place I could work. I'd started working when I came back from England as a grant writer for a city, and I felt very grateful, and I was deservedly grateful for having that position. It was a salary job with a pension. I was in my mid-30s, I had no savings. And that allowed me to really start rebuilding a life. At that time, there was a project in the city to start a philanthropic foundation. And because I had done the work at that art center for $27,000 a year with no benefits, they knew I had been an executive director. So they came up and they tapped me on the shoulder and they said, "You know nonprofit stuff, will you help us?" So over a 9-year period, I went from grants writer to coordinator to manager to executive director now of a $500 million foundation in Kalamazoo that funds the city and helps with projects that in total, broadly described, intend to ameliorate poverty there. It's broadly speaking a Rust Belt city, Kalamazoo is. So these circles of history come around and come back to us. And it was the project of a lifetime, and I felt anchored to it, but we kept our relationship alive over those years. And in that driving of 13 hours alone in the Midwest over 7 years, I developed this strange relationship with time and travel and these landscapes and people that I met, breakdowns or lunches or you name it. And it helped me again to see hopefully where I could build landscape into character and have it interact with poetry in an interesting way. So this is titled 4th of July. 4th of July. Yellow crop dusting planes do tricks over Interstate 55 in Missouri as if to disguise their real purpose with pageantry. It works for a while until the trails of chemical spray appear and settle over the fields. One Jason Bean is running for state senate, according to stake signs dotting farm ditches. The soy is low and the corn is high, but nothing is visibly flowering. Perhaps he will save the day. Patty's Inn near Portageville has no customers, though quarantine is poorly observed here. Taking a little away from nearly none is generally ruinous, except to the beauty of industrial corn plantations. Only one poplar stands spreading its branches clean as bones into the pale blue yonder. What is your stance on offshoring jobs, Mr. Bean? Do you believe in capital and maintenance reserves? What is your official position on technical education? Your red, white, and blue signs are too small for the specifics on your vision on immigration. We the people have questions. We have minds, as windowless as brick Jehovah's Witness halls. Down the highway come blades of windmills, long and elegant as shin bones, hooked to wheeled dollies made for that purpose. This raises the question of what else today is strong enough to support itself in motion? A nation? A people? A set of principles? A Greyhound bus is broken down on a remote stretch of 55. The black window glass conceals if the passengers sit silently in sweating concern, cursing no cell signal, or if they have already been rescued. Perhaps the bus was cycling home empty because that was most efficient according to management. Or perhaps Jason Bean sits alone inside the bus, weeping over a crackling connection to his young wife, having just been informed that he reached his fundraising goal. The Promised Land. Some towns make a claim on you the instant they open across your windshield. Take Wichita Falls, for example. Every boss who deserved to be told off, every sick day accumulated and forfeited, every ex-lover returned to out of sorrow can be found here inside a gated self-storage yard. But you are never alone in Wichita Falls. See the customers lined up outside Lucky's One Stop before opening. See the permanent residents of La Posada Motel watching days pass from the kingly perch of Breezeway railing. Unfortunately, the Promised Land bar is fresh out of milk and honey. What the barmaid recommends each day instead is bottled beer and a burger as she cleans the spill trays. She hums a cooling song that echoes down the trunk lines buried deep in tumbleweeds and trash. Everywhere here, warbling like heat waves, is the question of staying. Move here, a voice in the wind whispers, and live forever. A lizard appears without arriving and vanishes without departing. Ungrowing plants stand in hardpan. A dust side yard is buried deep in dog shit and endless barking, even though there is no dog in sight. A pickup truck can be well protected by its own rust. Perhaps this is a siren's hell, where you won't be able to feel your skin or recognize your own name in writing in the hangover of any given day. But the work will be paid and endless, and the burger will be served hot each day, arriving without being ordered, vanishing without being eaten. On some days, the barmaid's song may even overtake the sirens as she stands on the bar to hang yards of golden Christmas garland that snows down cellophane strands onto your head and shoulders. I don't know what I would do without the ability to interact with ideas and places and people and colors and shapes and transition. I just don't know what I would do. Well, no, I do know what I'd do. I'd destroy myself is what I would do. I would think that I could just work an office job and give up and get bitter, hate seeing people's paintings, especially good paintings, hate reading good books, and just die inside my phone, or even ostensibly good stuff, working out, running, just anything to avoid and to not address what it takes to just give up and be a creative person. There's a phrase, does bravery come through surrender? I think the answer is yes. This is titled Big Running Water Ditch. And maybe I'll do one or two more. And then I'd like to read a few poems in progress that'll come in future books. The fallow fields of Arkansas lie in living lavender of henbit and dead nettle blossoms against gray, winter trees and sky this morning. Color is the only sign of life, with no men needed on the land anymore. There are green robots named after a man to plow under the blossoms at night. The elimination of man arrives for the first time through extirpation of needing him, even as raw toil. The need has been hunted ruthlessly as bison that roamed even as far southeast as here. Skulls are piled into the famous pyramid again, topped by a proud mercenary. Need, sun-bleached and still. Robots are the only sound on earth. Birds' wings breathe too softly overhead to overhear over the drones, even in their millions. The telephone never rings late Sunday now with news of need that must be filled by men's bodies and once seemed endless as rivers of fowl marking seasons that the 24/7 pulp paper mill cannot mark. They burn the fields here, and it is beautiful to see smoke rolling and cutting winter light. 3 young men dressed in filthy Taco Bell shirts walk along the county highway to work in Pocahontas, pausing to watch the fire line advance toward their greasy black sneakers in a flameless veil of warbling heat. The vast field shimmers under fresh ash, fluxing now silver, now black, now silver, to the distant tree line. In a month, these fields will be flooded and pool in reflected sky, reflected migratory birds, and the long shadows of 3 young men walking to work. They will again pause here, but think instead of their lives like the vanished heat veil, and their lives like the empty sky, wondering as all young men do why they never get laid, why their boss is such a prick, and why Taco Bell is choosing their small town to announce its first fully automated location. Starlings rise as thick as house fires smoke to form rivers along the county highway. They compress and explode in sardine millions to settle back where they started, near the muddy creek named Big Running Water Ditch. Nearby, cotton bolls fallen from autumn transports lie entangled in the ratty verge of grass and wild okra. Here, mile after mile, is lost enough fiber for many families' pants and shirts, bedding and blankets. It blows in the wind from harvesters and balers. Surely, there is enough to weave just one respectable tablecloth on which to present a feast of real food for 3 young families. In one of the poems, or more than one of the poems, is mentioned the idea of dreaming the world into existence, which is in some way a universal concept, maybe in European antiquity, definitely in Aboriginal songline, Dreamtime culture. It's something that, in a sense, once seen can't be unseen. It's not just the idea of perceiving something and therefore making it and changing it, but also a sense of constantly being able to feel that I'm revolutionizing my appreciation for the world through the act of perception. So this idea of there is no amount of appreciation that the world can't reward, right? Through the idea of, say, paying attention is the phrase. It's a sacrifice. We give attention to it in exchange for what? And it's good wisdom that I received, and that we become what we pay attention to. And that can be through the examples in our lives very literally, that can also be creatively, is if we orient ourselves toward a task, we do change reality. It's so simple to say, is if you show up and write every day, you are a person who has shown up and written every day. But that is all that there is to it. There's a person who talks about painting, and there's a person who paints. And the person who paints learns everything. The person who doesn't. This was hard fought for me too, because as a teenager I thought, I knew everything, and I'm the one out here getting arrested. You dumb kids are in high school, you don't know nothing. But I was actually forfeiting all the knowledge that they were learning. Stupid stuff like learning how to fall off a horse and get back up. Having your heart broken and learning to love again. Not minor skills. And it's the same creatively, is that We learn through doing. And so in all of these pieces, there's some attempt on my part to understand what the hell is happening around me. The span of 1 month. We agree that it is truthful and right to accept the beauty in our mother's dying, to support our father's efforts to aid and honor their wives, despite the men's professed unworthiness. The evident exhaustion of both men, rolling down at the shoulders, sleeping late, refusing help, asking everything at least twice. Yes, the back door is locked. Yes, there is enough milk for morning. Yes, Pop, she liked that tie on you. We agree on the image of cave people, gawking, making their noises in circular paces, prodding gently at their loved ones' bodies. With no worse understanding than ours, we agree, of what does or does not happen after death. And we agree, undressing for bed those nights, that our fathers would agree as well and smile in the silence that is available to hearing, in the privacy of their mourning, once the cards have stopped arriving and the paperwork is signed and cold, and we children have gone home, leaving them to undress from their yellowed cotton bearskins, alone, for the first time in what seemed like millennia. A night pine. Belong to earth. Feel the belonging. It comes only rarely, as hallucination, a great shroud of night pine overhead. Your life is a petroglyph of a winged man with roots for feet and a fish heart. He was etched in the cornerstone of your home all along. Here, you recall a voice insisting. Here. Through the terrible wandering away of self-doubt, despite the ingenious non-commitment of boyhood, flesh was burnt into ash. Ash was compressed into stone, and stone was carved into a man. Perhaps all things happen despite us. Maybe fresh water dreams itself lapping a reed shore somewhere. Did you ever consider that? Sun can set on clear evenings with earth's fullness as a body in eternity drawn open to perception. It is still possible to move through the world as if dreaming the world into being. Go fly on these evenings, out across the earth, scarred and remade by your cinder trails, past premature eulogies of yourself, to the garden you still tend in the modest plot that owns you. It's very difficult to know when one has drank too much. It's also very difficult to know when one has read too many poems. So the clock has given me a signal that maybe a few more make sense. So these will be collected in the next few years in chapbooks like these. And a note on this now is, these are self-published. That dirty, nasty word, self-published, which is interesting. So I've published in journals and magazines, academic, commercial, in Germany, in England, in the US. I ran out of steam about 15 years ago, so there's a big, 2012, a lot of my effort there fell off. But one of the things that happened was a publisher in Berlin had seen an article I did on a coal slash in East Germany that was flooded and turned into a recreational lake. And so he wanted to send me on an assignment to write a book, and I did. And he loved it very much, and he published it. And I was paid in advance, and it was released nationwide in the German-speaking world, and I did national radio and television in Germany, and then that was that. And what I realized was, for one thing, I still have to do all the work. I still would have had to have had a social media presence. I still would have had to have done a book tour, et cetera, et cetera. And nowadays with publishing, it's extraordinarily difficult to break through to an agent or a publisher, even for a fantastic, full-length, marketable work of fiction or nonfiction. We're talking about poetry. We're talking about somewhat gritty poetry. So part of my, really my second half of life experience with sobering up, with coming to terms with needing to make art unequivocally, was to say, I just need to move ahead. And so I decided to put these together. And I had, all of a sudden, I realized I had all the skills. I could take the pictures, I could format the books, I could choose the type, I could design the pages, I could lay them out, I could curate the proper order in a way that was very interesting. I could publish them, I could make the website, I could coordinate the talks, I could perform the talk, I could do the whole thing. And I thought, well, why don't we just get busy? And why don't we have full creative control over this? Instead of having sensitivity readers at a university press that doesn't like my use of an adjective, instead of going through 6, 8, 9, 24 months to put a book out that sells no more copies and probably fewer than I will by just putting myself out there. So it was a decision also that came with the realization that self-publishing is a nasty word because the institution of publishing doesn't like it. And I'm not saying it's a threat to it or anything. It's just the nature of when you have gatekeeping, you have a dislike of things that can't be gate-kept. And when you go back to the beginning of publishing in the United Kingdom and continental Europe, Dickens was published by a bookstore. It's basically Virginia Woolf's husband had a press, so she published her books. So this idea that corporatized, mega juggernaut international publishing is the only legitimate way is just untrue. And it's also impractical and it's destructive. So those were all thought processes I came around to this, and even now I think, well, maybe I should send things off to competition and maybe I should wait. But I have a vision and I need to follow through with that. So I'm going to continue putting these chapbooks out and doing this. And hopefully next time I come here, it's standing room only. And you two have to elbow your way forward. We'll see. So this is for the artists in the room. This is titled Varnish. The aging artist was preparing work for a final exhibition. The young artist traveled an hour for the privilege to see him. The young artist was in love with him as secretly as sleep. This older man, who stood as if an owl was perched on his soul, yet still opened himself in smile. The blizzard made it difficult to get to the remote studio. Stacked and standing carved figures left only a rug of free space. 2 chairs stood close by a potbelly stove. A small radio played jazz. Wood can be honed to the ragged aura of skin, carved, gouged, sanded, layered in paint, the color of the memory of a dead father. The aging artist was searching along a lonely split grain for faith. His wife was very ill, and he worked day and night to make ends meet. He barely had contact with the outside world. Solitude was its own clock. One day, life begins snowing. One day, life begins melting. 40 years pass and return as longing for a dead lover. The young artist listened to the aging artist for hours, standing to see and touch the work after asking, "May I touch this?" Then sitting again to hear more and trying to understand more about the carvings. Quinacridon red in places, cerulean blue in places, the green of spring daffodil leaves. The aging artist quoted Fuentes several times. He has sought a voice in a wooden statue varnished in blood. The young artist had one question in mind that could not be asked. The young artist ruminated on this question, not knowing if it would offend the aging artist. It was hard to imagine the gentle eyes narrowing, the face hardening, but that is the way of things sometimes. As dusk came, an ease, and the young artist broke a long quiet of jazz and crackling embers in the potbelly stove. "May I see your hands?" he asked. The aging artist was looking out at what would become his final exhibition and to the falling snow outside and house among pines, where his wife lay. Now he looked down at his hands resting on his long-boned thighs. He leaned forward, letting the hands rise and rotate in the air. He held them out as if to give them over to the young artist. "These?" he said. And for a moment the young artist was scared by their size and age. He had no idea what he would do with them, how he could accept them. But it was too late to turn back. Cold white, rough yet burnished, thin yet expansive. These hands made no sense. These hands had the look of old scarred ice over tangled depths. Suddenly the young artist's request did not seem so strange. It seemed urgent, as though these two men had to solve the problem of these hands together. What had they been discussing these past hours, if not this? The young artist cradled the hands in his own, ran his thumbs outward across the palms. In the arc, his joints naturally swept. The pads of each finger joint showed a unique history of holding, gripping, twisting, rubbing, drying, cracking, bleeding, healing, hosting slivers and calluses, perhaps since before the young artist was born. Inside the aging artist remained an artist as young as the young artist, just as the sapling remains always deep inside the ancient tree. The young artist wanted to lower his face into the hands, to press them to his cheeks and smell their cedar scent. What else could he do with these hands except form his body anew around their natural desire to work, serve, fight, crawl, climb, claw, caress, and pray? How would the curve of a lover feel under the touch of these hands? How would the cheek of a dying woman accept their soft stroking? The young artist moved gently, as if passing a bramble bush in loose cloth. Some love must be entered on tiptoes. Some love must be awakened with warmth and waiting. The young artist cradled the hands, and in his mind kissed them with his thumbs yet as tender as lips. That's maybe a place to leave off, unless there are requests for a, what's Tsugabe? Encore. And encore, okay. Let's see. So jumping topics. As I said, one of the thematic books, I think, and this may be the titular piece for the book, Fire, Salt, and Silence, is gardening, agriculture, natural visions. And I was honored this year to be the writer/naturalist in residence on Beaver Island in Lake Michigan. And so I went out there for 2 weeks and was on a historic farm in a tent, a yurt for 2 weeks, and was given access to a farmhouse to sit and write. And a tremendous amount of writing came out of that, which I think will be added to the existing writing here. But it may also be its own project, I don't know. But in Fenton we had a huge garden, half the size of this room, and canned and made sauerkraut. And my family's always loved gardens. It's really one of the most beautiful places I know to be is a vegetable garden when it's fruiting. And so a lot of my writing comes from that, and this is one of them. Do not begrudge the garden that overgrows by autumn. Good does not turn bad because we are through with it. Spoiled as we are on earth, praying secretly for fire, salt, and silence. The spring-sprouting nettles spread, hidden nightshades erupt gold-pistiled in violet skirts. Milkweed breaches along root paths, seeking unseen below the fences of made-up property lines. The unmatched force of the force to live. Why does it bring us such sorrow? Everything that creeps abides. Not everything low is bitter. Not everything high is noble. But cold, all of them, sleet-lashed and brittle, bereft of seed or breaking under the weight of fruit, still growing and growing, growing by not dying in frozen soil. The weeds our weak stomachs scorn are sought out by a goat's tongue. It is jealously that we garden, and jealousy that we garden. Shielded today from loss by drought and dogs. Carrying only watering cans, and kneeling at night, once the heat has broken, to wrench and twist at the thistle in our lettuce patch, only to fall back when the stem breaks and the root is left locked in the earth, weeping a single white tear of laughter. There is I wonder if I have it here. It is not fated to be. I do not have a copy of it. Okay, and a final errand at a friend's house. She was 8 months pregnant, and their first boy was already 3. He had begun to study his father welding. He watched him clean perch and pack ammunition. I began watching the boy watching the father. This day I went to drop off coupons at their farm out beyond the county buildings. They were on the ice jigging for whitefish, I supposed. I knew the kitchen door was unlocked as always, but hesitated and couldn't open it. Her stainless steel canning tools were all stacked for the year. There were 3 pairs of rubber boots by the door. A feeling overcame me, unbidden, to attend a mass. Not for any God reasons, but to have people who stood and knelt where I had last left them, quietly searching their hearts together. Standing there in the near silence of winter, it occurred to me that I had planned to tell my friend that I was sorry to have missed his son's birthday, but that my drinking had gotten out of control again. And I had heard in recent weeks of 2 different families with young children that had been murdered by their fathers. It had become impossible to account for anything I wanted to say. Even matters inside my own home were a total mystery to me. Arise into your day. What do you think? What does your mind think? Dreams distracted me by borrowing lives from the men I knew, and even those I saw in stores. My friend had by then lent me things like his truck, his boat, but no one would ever think to offer the contentment of fatherhood, an offer to join this family that has already branched to make shade. That is not how families work, anyway. Anyway, he must have already known in his way. She knew, I suspected. That explained why there was a space of light between us like a held-up hand. Sorry I missed you, I wrote on an old receipt to leave for them. Here are some coupons. I'll come back later. Although I did not go back for some time. But then I did. It means a lot.